Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
Listen, inflation's sky high, interest rates are going up, less people are spending money, gas is going up, more people are staying home, and merchants and brands have to get a lot more creative on how they're going to get items to their customers.
Welcome, Ecom Logistics Podcast Nation. Nanad and I are excited to welcome Alok Ahuja, CEO and co-founder of Trexity. Prior to founding Trexity, Alok was a product manager with Smith, launched his first company, Seedless Apps, and spent 3 years at Shopify in a variety of leadership roles. Alok, it's great to have you join us today, and welcome, my friend.
Awesome. Dan, thank you. And Nanad, thank you guys. Appreciate you both having me on the podcast.
Welcome, Alok. I'm actually really excited because all the prep calls that we have had with Alok up until now, I wish we had recorded the prep calls themselves because those could have turned into a podcast itself. So
100%. Look, you've spent your career in technology, product development, partnerships, marketplaces. Would love if you could share with us your background story and how that led you to launching Trexity in 2018.
No, for sure. I've always been pretty enamored with commerce and tech as a whole. I think my fascination started at university, and I think it was 2004 or 2003 when I got my first Carleton University email address. And I was like, what is this thing? And what am I going to use it for? And very quickly realized that, the way that I was submitting assignments digitally and I didn't have to run to my prof's office door and slide it through the slot. I quickly understood that the world was changing and technology was and is going to be the catalyst of that change. And I very quickly got excited and I made a pivot in my education and I started to steer that towards computers and technology. And I never looked back. And I've always had an affection for business. And I think that was instilled in me from my father, who was an immigrant from India and came to Canada 65 years ago and built this empire through real estate and investments and was a chartered accountant. And I always loved that business side of the hustle. But then I thought to myself, imagine I could meld my love of business with my new passion for technology. And in a way, I went on my journey. And yeah, it started as soon as I graduated. I went right into the tech world with a startup here in Ottawa with a group of gentlemen, and we were solving the problem around web personalization back in 2006 when personalization was not owned by Amazon. And very quickly, while we were able to send these personalized message visits to users that were coming to commerce websites, I very quickly thought to myself, this is extremely powerful, where we were able to recognize if a visitor was coming from California in December to a website or whether it was somebody from Toronto, and then send a directed message to that visitor based on the products that were more relevant to them. And I said, there's something here, like the world will change here. And that was a fun moment in time. I had an opportunity to witness and be a part of a company going public. Definitely learned a lot at a young age. Then quickly, got acquired and went over to a company called Cactus Commerce, which eventually morphed into what you mentioned, my time at Smith, and getting the opportunity to work with a lot of Internet Retailer 500 companies from Honeywell to Aramark to spending some time at Hamburger University in Chicago working with McDonald's and really becoming accustomed to how to cater to enterprise commerce users and merchants, right? It's not the same as your mom and pop store, and took a big liking to it and became quickly familiarized with Commerce Server 2009 and Hybris and Sitecore and all those kind of bigger solutions that these commerce brands were leaning towards. And I think it helps that I'm situated here in Ottawa, Canada, the birthplace and headquarters of Shopify. And I was an early Shopify user and had a couple of different stores that I spun up and really started to fall in love with the platform. And that's when I made the jump over and I said, I want to be a part of this thing. And it was an interesting time hopping onto that rocket ship and getting an opportunity to spread my wings and help scale Shopify Plus, which was Shopify's enterprise and still is Shopify's enterprise solution platform. And my background spoke to it perfectly. Getting an opportunity to work with the brands like Kylie Jenner Cosmetics and Diane von Furstenberg. I remember being in her office in New York City and just thinking to myself, I can't believe this massive brand wants to work with this local startup in Ottawa. And it was a moment in time. And I still think it's going very strong and making a big impact on the community and getting getting the chance to travel the world and educate these massive digital agencies that, listen, Shopify Plus is a viable solution for enterprise customers, and really pitching them and selling them on it was exhilarating. Especially when you saw those brands go live with Shopify, I knew that there was an impact being made here. But what I will say is, I think the underlining theme of that entire experience was getting firsthand experience of understanding how these brands work, the time and money they put into their products and the experience. And I recall being on site at a merchant's offices and them kind of showing me the R&D around the packaging they were putting into their products and the opening moment. It was like opening an iPhone, you know. When Apple came out with those iPhones, the unboxing was a moment in time. It was great. But then I felt to myself in that moment that the experience was so disjointed, because they would take that product, they'd put it in a brown box, they'd put tons of tape and then throw it into a US postal bag and wait for someone to come pick that up. And I thought, this seems off. Like there's something wrong here. And I always just kept that inside. And I wasn't about to solve that problem in that moment. I had a lot on my plate at the time, but my time at Shopify came to an end in 2018. I stepped back to be a father to my two very young kids that I was barely seeing any of, and decided to double down and be a son to my father, who was at the time battling pancreatic cancer. That's when you really start to put things into perspective, right? You step away from those 16-hour days and a lot of travel, and you start to realize what's important. That's when this problem of getting something from the store within the same day basically took over my life, right? It was impossible to do. I knew there had to be a better way. And so very quickly started to figure out how we could solve this problem. Like, how could we enable any merchant, any local merchant in the world to offer some degree of same or next day local delivery, right? And because of my experience, because of the 14, 15 years I've had being immersed in commerce and sitting with these merchants all over the world, I knew they just needed a way to do it, right? If they could move packages as fast as they could have ever imagined, truly own their customers' doorsteps in an intimate way, there was something here. And I'll be honest with you guys. I mean, I looked at these merchants as micro warehouses, right? They were busting at the seams with inventory. So why are we not giving them a shot? Why couldn't they compete against the Amazons of the world? This is where the journey began in 2018. And this is how Trexity was born with myself and my co-founders.
And so just to be clear, right? So it is still locally focused, or now you are also focused more nationally, or from a shipping standpoint or delivery standpoint? Are you just looking at things from a pure local enablement, or are you seeing these partners grow in size and you are still helping the locals, but there is another play? Has the company evolved, right? Like that pivot or persevere from that business standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is the beauty of technology, is we started out empowering local merchants, right? The SMBs of the world, the undervalued, the underserved, right? So the ones we went after back at Shopify and did not have to reinvent the wheel. I quickly noticed what they were doing and the impact they were making, and I didn't have to reinvent the wheel here. So look at it this way. We started out empowering your favorite store on your favorite street of your favorite neighborhood, right? The local mom and pop. And one of the things that was really important to us when we started out was we said, let's be the true last mile partner, right? The same day we pick it up, it's the same day we're going to drop it off. As fast as our merchants are willing to fulfill it, it's as fast as we will deliver it. Let this be the one thing that we do so perfectly well that no one else can touch us on it. And we also decided day one to be an assetless business, right? We didn't want these warehouses and these massive hubs. Like, it wasn't for us. We wanted to be very light, very efficient, very low barrier to entry, so these mom and pops could easily focus on their business while knowing that their customers' doorsteps were protected and owned because of us. That's where we started. And we had a massive impact and still continue to have a massive impact on these local economies. And so to answer your question, it's hyperlocal, right? We started out here in Ottawa. We've now scaled to multiple cities across Canada and continue to grow. But because we decided to stay hyper-focused on that one thing that we wanted to perfect, not by design, we have now caught the attention of national merchants and enterprise merchants. And so even though SMBs is our core, we've started to entertain these opportunities with much larger merchants that are all across Canada with multi-location and are having a great impact there. So as a CEO startup, it's very hard for me to say no to business. And so I always entertained those opportunities, and it is now paying off because we're now seeing the fruits of our labor and the footprint that we have within Canada, not just help serve the SMBs, but all merchants alike.
You bring up such a good point right there, because we see this in the market ourselves as well, is if you stay focused, so if you are asset light or based on assets, in the quick commerce, rapid grocery delivery, in the last mile delivery space, rather than trying to build a startup that focuses nationally to just like come right out of the gate saying, I'm going to have a national network and I'm going to have my gig economy drivers, I'm going to buy 2,000, vans so I can do the delivery, right? That's not the successful model. What we are seeing is, and we can speak to some companies that we have worked with in the past on the rapid grocery delivery side of things, right? You pick one market and you perfect that market very, very well. And then you kind of replicate that market elsewhere, but still stay local to those markets, have regionalization and understanding of the differences and nuances that they bring for you to be able, because there is enough juice in each city.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, what it's doing is also there is so many companies, right? Like just if I was to just talk about in the Toronto area and different philosophies, right? But there is 4 or 5 companies that are doing this, if not more. And I would think New York's probably got way more, and Chicago's got more, and LA's got even more. And I'm betting that in the Silicon Valley, there is, probably over a dozen companies trying to do this. Where does the industry go, Alok? Well, what ends up happening?
Yeah, and listen, we're seeing that too. Like day one, we built out a competitive matrix and we said, who are all the people in this space doing this? And there was a lot. I mean, this is becoming a very busy space and there's a reason for it. I mean, it's a $400 billion addressable market. And why shouldn't there be a lot of players, right? And I don't think it will ever be won by a single unit. I think there's a lot of room here and it's being solved in a number of different ways, right? There are those warehousers. There are those with the Hive system moving it from driver to driver to get it to where it needs to go. I mean, there are some very interesting ways this is being solved, but because we made that decision to be the true last mile, like literally from the merchant or the warehouse directly to the doorstep with nothing in between, tracked in real time, with proper humans doing the delivery, that's where we found our niche. Now, a lot of the competitors that we saw out there early days, they were very ambitious and we found that there was a lot of, and I'm going to go into this and this might be a whole other topic, but I have to touch on it, but there was a lot of young founders. Okay. And I love that because that's what I did growing up. Right. And when you're young, you're very ambitious. I'm not saying just because I'm older, I'm not ambitious, but I'm just saying you don't have family, you don't have kids, you don't have anything to worry about. This is it. And you're easily influenced because I was, and I made those mistakes. Right. I would listen to people or I'd listen to investors and they'd say, Alok, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about doing it this way? You talk to these guys, they're doing it and it'll work. And next thing you know, I'm not doing one thing, I'm doing 10 things, but I'm doing all 10 of those things kind of on a mediocre level. I'm not laser focused on perfecting them. And I spread my net too wide and I ended up burning myself. And I've had some incredible failures. And those are the moments in time that I love because it's where I did the most amount of growing up.
I take chapter out of the book of what's going on within the fulfillment space, right? Like that's the arena that we know really well, and delivery, we are more consumers of delivery, right? But I look at the fulfillment space and there is owned infrastructure versus I'm a platform and I'm going to orchestrate against multiple different warehouse operators as an example, right? Like a 4PL model versus a 3PL model. And I'm kind of more leaning towards the 3PL side. That's what makes sense from a unit economic standpoint. And if you look at the infrastructure and whatnot, how do you see this space play out? Because that's where the clear delineation in the market happens to be in the last mile delivery space. Is it owned infrastructure or is it a gig economy based? You got drivers that are coming on board and it's Uberification, let's call it, right? Like off your delivery service. Or it is FedEx Ground versus, FedEx Express. Is it a contracted user or is it a owned user?
Yeah. And I think you just explained it yourself right there. It's not one or the other, right? Both of those FedEx models exist for a reason because there's an addressable market for both of them. And I don't think it has to be warehousing or direct from merchant. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. And what I do love about some of the bigger brands that we work with, some of our national brands, is they do a combination of both. And it's because they're catering to different personas of customers and users. And when you start to forget about the people that shop at your store and evaluate all of them or categorize all of them as one type of shopper, as a brand, you will fail. You will not understand what happened over the last 6 months and wonder where all your profits went. And I think I said this the other day in another great conversation I was having, but a lot of the reasons why 3PL and ground and express and same day local or next day local exist is because brands have gotten a lot smarter about how they're looking at their commerce experience, right? And we said this the other day is, I had a great conversation with a Fortune 500 company, and they said, Alok, we've got multiple brick and mortar stores across Canada. We've got, a great buy online, pick up in store facilities there. And then we've got our online store as its own entity where we can ship directly from our warehouses. And I told them just to stop talking. I said, you guys just got to stop. Because what you're doing is you're creating a line of delineation between your brick and mortars and your online store. This is now commerce. This is one unit. Okay. And you have to approach it that way. Now, I'm not saying that they're not going to be solved in different ways, right? Maybe your online is strictly for warehousing. Maybe you can fulfill from storefront based on the IP and build a headless commerce experience, which a lot of big brands are doing now and having a ton of success with. I think it's understanding what you have as a brand, then diving in and saying, okay, where is there overlap? Where are the solutions that we're currently using that can fulfill from all of these entities, right? And if it is a same day local player, hey, we can get them at our warehouse. We can get them in our store. We can get them for everything hyperlocal. And then let's stick to the FedEx Express for multiple city. You know what I mean? I think it's not one or the other. I think it's these tools and these companies like myself exist so that brands can get very smart about building a tool belt like Batman and saying, I need to pull this out for this and I need to pull that out for this and be ready to tackle commerce.
Absolutely. And it's been happening in the industry, right? Like one of the things that I find really interesting about specifically the mid-market, right? What sometimes we refer to as innovation are things that enterprises have been doing for decades, right? Like multi-carrier decision making of like, what carrier am I going to use to fulfill a given delivery based on transit time, cost, the service, the whatever it be, right? Like I've seen setups today in large enterprise environments where there is like 10 plus carriers that they are trying to arbitrage against to try and figure out what is the best solution that they are going to pick. And how do you bring that to the mid-market for that to survive as well, right? Like in the local delivery or hyper-local delivery market, having that capability available to the mid-market or even the really small underserved segment, right? Like to make the best choice decision from a unit economic standpoint for themselves.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think, a lot of the conversations that people like yourself and me have on a daily basis. And I mean, and listen, this last mile riddle has consumed my life in the most beautiful way. Like it's just, I can't get enough of it. We seem to also forget that the unit economics, which you mentioned, I think it's really important, is that's crucial to a lot of the business that we deal with, right? Like, listen, inflation's sky high, interest rates are going up, less people are spending money, gas is going up, more people are staying home, and merchants and brands have to get a lot more creative on how they're going to get items to their customers or how they're going to hook their customers into buying their products. And believe it or not, home delivery has become a massive proponent of how these businesses look at now interacting with their customers. And not only has it been a new stream of service, but also a new stream of revenue. What we see from our data and a lot of the relationships we have with our merchants is because we can stay so hyper competitive based on the volume that we're doing, our merchants are making money on delivery. This is a profit stream for them. And that's when it gets really special, right? That's when you start to understand, hey, listen, you're not only helping them own their customer's doorstep, but you're helping them put more money in the bank and keep their doors open and continue to thrive, which is what we need to do in this time of economic need.
Equally an awesome conversation, Alok. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's plug again. Let everyone know where they could find you on social media, where to find more and learn more about Trexity, so they could start exploring this for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Go to Trexity.com. So TREXITY.com. Check us out on Instagram. It's at Trexity app. So Trexity app. And our team is willing to work with any brand. I mean, this is what we set out to do. We tell our team all the time, we're not here for second place, and neither are our merchants. And so it's a very simple process moving something from point A to point B. It's been the same for thousands of years, and I don't think it'll ever change. The only difference is us as a group of people at Trexity, we've obsessed over what could happen from moving something from point A to point B. And so we've relied on building a world-class support team and technology and caring, loving, mindful people that actually care about the needs of our merchants. That's the difference. And so I welcome anybody listening to reach out to myself or my team. I'm always available to talk. That's how I met Nanad and Dan. And I can't wait to come down to Toronto and maybe Pittsburgh to hang with you guys. But I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was an absolute honor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy. Really good, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to maximize your supply chain. Available on all major podcasting channels. Thank you for listening and see you in the next episode.